Hello and welcome to Steve and Dave's 50 Years Ago this month. This time around, we're going to be talking about December 18th, 1971,
Yep.
Hot 100 Billboard chart.
That's right.
And it's another good chart this time. A lot of good hits this time around.
That it is.
And I guess I'll just jump right into it. At number one this month is the first that we've heard from Sly and the Family Stone for quite a while.
Yeah, that's right.
For nearly 2 years. It's a family affair. And there are several reasons for this. Probably first and foremost, the fact that members of the family and probably primarily Sly Stone himself have been dipping into PCP and cocaine, and there's some serious drug issues.
Yes, that's right.
Sly Stone becoming increasingly moody, paranoid, with some, a couple gangsters as bodyguards, and even keeping members of his band at arm's length.
Yep.
So you think about a song that's called Family Affair, and that repeats again and again. It's a family affair. And it sounds like the sort of thing that would be kind of the declaration of the program of Sly and the Family Stone.
That's
family
right.
affair. It's all about family, right? And in the first several years of that band's incarnation, it really was what it's all about.
That's exactly right. No, that's exactly right. Yeah.
It's just funny that they're recording it now when they're really moving away from this. And the song itself is ambivalent at best, talking about things that connect us to each other, but
that's right.
Also the things that pull us apart, that make being family, being close, being intimate, difficult or painful.
Yeah.
So this was all part of a drift, I think, away from a lot of the idealism that Sly Stone and the family started off embodying.
I think that's well said. It's he is in personal free fall by this point. It's also the case that he regularly misses engagements and misses concerts. The band is sort of only barely functioning, I suppose, at this point. There is a certain sort of melancholy, a certain darkness that it's tangible in the song and in the LP. Right, there's right going on. It's there as well. It's there's a certain sadness. I mean, like you said, the Sly and the Family Stone project was an optimistic and kind of pan-racial notion of maybe where America was headed. And by the time we get to the early 70s, by late 71, I mean, it's disintegrating.
Yeah, well, to the point that Sly Stone recorded most of this single alone in his home studio.
That's right.
And there was a lot of overdubs and stuff going on, but for the most part, most of the singing was done lying in bed at his home in Bel Air. It just, so we have Rose Stone singing along with this as well, and we also have Billy Preston on keyboards, and they got Bobby Womack coming in on rhythm guitar. So even the other people that are involved are mostly not Family Stone members, right? But to the great relief of the record company, because he was not just missing performances, he was missing recording dates.
That's right.
They did actually bring this out, and as you said, It was their 5th studio album to date. It was released on November 1st, which suggests something about how quickly this became a hit, right? Just like
That's right.
with a bullet. But the album was originally going to be called Africa Talks to You. But kind of in answer to the musical question from Marvin Gaye, what's going on? There's a riot going on.
That's right.
All right. So
that's it.
The flower power and peace and love has given way to a much more cynical view of what's actually happening. And we see this in Marvin Gaye, we see this in Sly and the Family Affair, and even to a certain extent, we'll talk about it later, in the Staple singers. So there's this dark undercurrent going on, especially about inner cities, especially about Black power and that move toward militancy.
It's the age of optimism has clearly evaporated, and there are a few more tragic figures from this era than Sly Stone himself. It's just, he's at the pinnacle, right? He's at the pinnacle of American music, to some degree, American cultural life, and it just all crumbles away.
Well, just a genius musician and writer, right? And what he put together was a very special project that worked for a while,
Sure, absolutely.
Just a couple more things about this. Family Affair reached #1 on the pop singles chart. Was eventually certified platinum for sales of at least 1 million copies in the US. This was a very critically acclaimed album, although not necessarily right at first. There was such extensive overdubbing going on that it was even difficult to hear or understand the singing, the lyrics that were that not overdubbed, that were originally put on tape. And so the quality of it was compromised at best, but retroactively, it's considered one of the great albums. And Rolling Stones placed it at 99th of their 500 greatest albums of all time in 2003. And in 2020, it moved up to 82nd in that list. So it kind of gives you an idea.
Absolutely. No, that's right.
The B-side was Love and Hate, like Hate Asbury. And this all was written by Sly Stone and produced by Sly Stone. This was their third and final #1 pop single. And the album itself came out after the record company in desperation had put out a greatest hits at the end of the year previous. So this was kind of the swan song.
And like you said, it's shot to the top of the charts very quickly. People had a real hunger for anything that was new from Sly. But this is sort of it. This is the long goodbye when it comes to Sly Stone in particular. So we have Family Affair at the top of the charts in mid-December 1971. At #2, it's a charming song, but is it a little bit more? We have Melanie's Brand New Key.
Right, Melanie. Charming song by a particularly charming singer. I think Steve and I are definitely on the same page as that's concerned. Just a real sweet person. She's probably still in the flower power, love, peace mentality in 1971. Because she was a strong believer. But this is a bit of a departure for her. And she was a little bit concerned about this because it meant that maybe she wouldn't be taken seriously anymore, because it is very light, frivolous almost, but that's part of what makes it so fun. Brand New Key by Melanie. She wrote this after having gone on a water fast for 21 days. And then she's in New Jersey, goes to a flea market, and on her way back home, they pass a McDonald's.
Oh my God.
And all of a sudden, she gets this huge yearning for McDonald's. She was vegetarian previous to the fast.
Oh my God.
But she just needed to have a hamburger. So they go and they grab a hamburger, fries, shake. And I guess as a result of her meat high, she said she had just finished the meal, and this song came to her. And she said there's something about, it was reminiscent to her of back home with her family, with her dad. And for some reason, she flashed on her experience learning to ride a bike with him. And he's pushing her, like fathers do. And she says, do you have me? Do you have me? Do you have me? And she said, then I looked back and he didn't have me, and I fell over. But this is what she was thinking about. So talking about riding a bike to her, to the guy she likes, the guy she has a crush on, to his house. And then she rides there or goes there on her roller skates, because she has a brand new pair of roller skates. And she wants to get his attention and just never quite manages to.
Yeah. Okay. And so I this is drawn from a meat high from the experience at McDonald's. Yes. Oh, that's fantastic. Okay. We should explain though that when you talked about roller skates in the day, roller skates would fit on top of your shoes. They would kind of, I don't know, you have your shoes on and then the skates, and then you could adjust the size of the skate with the key. You would allow you to manipulate the skate. And so it's we don't see these kinds of things anymore, but that's the direct kind of, that's what's happening.
Yeah.
But there might be, but there might be more happening here. So,
well, Melanie herself suggests that, she wasn't thinking about this sort of thing, but she does understand how a lock and a key are very Freudian things, and under the circumstances, it's not hard to understand. And she goes on to say that she's not very fast, but she goes really far. And that she's been all around the world, which is also sometimes a sexual term, a sexual phrase. So one can understand and understand people who think it might be a sexual song, that there might be a sexual innuendo intended here. But whether or not it is, it's a fun song, very upbeat, and fun to listen to. And,
it is fun to listen to. Yeah, it is fun to listen to. It was a big hit. I think to some degree, her trepidation about the song, I think, is warranted. As she sings the song, this protagonist there's certainly a kind of childlike naivete to it. And in a way, it becomes Melanie's, I think, biggest song. And
it was her greatest success. Yeah.
And it kind of sticks to her in a way that I don't know all that helpful in terms of her career. Because she was, as you're suggesting, at this era, she was still a flower power kind of icon. This was, legit. She had that kind of, and the brand new key is a kind of departure from that to be.
Yeah, she said, quote, "I was sure I was doomed to be cute for the rest of my life."
Yes.
And there's something to that. And her other biggest hit was "Look What They've Done to My Song," right? Oh, yeah. Which is also miles away from her peace and love repertoire. So what she's best known for is really not what defines her work. Actually, I
think that's right. When push comes to shove, I think that's it. This is the song that people remember her, but it doesn't really. It's not a representation of what she did and why she was important in this era.
By the way, this was actually the number 9 song of 1972 on the Hot 100. So, it was big.
Well, it was big. It was okay. It was the kind of song that when it came on the radio, the little kids in the back seat were singing to. It's the kind of song that suddenly, like an elementary school choir would, they acquire, they get the sheet music, and it had a kind of life of its own in this era,
Yeah.
for sure.
Went to number one on the Christmas week, 1971.
There we go.
Well, that's
yeah. Well, there you go. So Melanie, the great Melanie, with Brand New Key. At number 3, we talked about this group and song last month, but it's the Chi-Lites, Have You Seen Her? Which is
great song.
It's a great song, and it's also a really interesting song in that it's there's a certain kind of emotional growth that's being expressed, that a man overlooks his lover, and he's kind of paying an emotional price for his wandering eye or whatever. It's a surprisingly deep song from the Chi-Lites.
But this is one of those tropes that we see again and again in the popular music, right? You never know what you have until it's gone. And
no, that's exactly.
I took my woman for granted, and now I'm sorry.
I think there we go. I think that's well said. At number 4, then we have an old-fashioned love song by Three Dog Night, who when it comes to sort of the early 70s, if it's the Three Dog Night, they're on the charts all the time.
Oh yeah.
A couple things about Three Dog Night. They were known for their discerning taste when it came to songwriters and songs. They oftentimes would identify relatively new songwriters, maybe even sort of unknown songwriters, and perform their song, and then which would then elevate them. Laura Nyro, Randy Newman, and Paul Williams all benefited from having their songs on Three Dog Night albums. And so Old Fashioned Love Song was penned by Paul Williams, who is a fascinating figure, actually. Paul Williams, who was from Nebraska, whose mother took him west to get into show business. Paul Williams, who was not only a songwriter of note, but in the 70s and into the early 80s was an actor, a kind of celebrity, a kind of professional celebrity.
He was just about everywhere, especially in the 70s. You couldn't turn on a variety show or a Fantasy Island episode or whatever. Paul Williams turned up everywhere.
That's exactly right. No, that's for sure. And Tonight Show, seemingly every other month, there was Paul Williams. He was a kind of go-to celebrity kind of figure, go-to celebrity guest, much at his own peril. I mean, Paul Williams has been very open about this. He had terrible addiction problems and has rebounded, and he's a remarkable figure. I mean, his longevity in the industry is just extraordinary. But Three Dog Night, again, this is if they had a calling card, it was that they picked songs from up and coming songwriters. And so Old Fashioned Love Song is another one of those. Williams wrote this initially, kind of had the Carpenters in mind for it. And if you think about it, I mean, you could kind of see where Karen Carpenter, this would work. Richard Carpenter, though, famously rejected it. He didn't want any part of it.
He wanted to do Yesterday Once More instead.
There you go.
It's the same song, basically.
It's the same song. No, it's the same song. I know. But it is the case that the Carpenters actually did perform the song on the Carol Burnett show. That was a 70s staple as well, but never recorded it. Three Dog Night then picked it up. Chuck Negron was the lead on it, and really does, I think, a great job. The organ piece that opens the song is the late Jimmy Greenspoon, who was on keyboards for Three Dog Night. It's Three Dog Night is maybe never were the critics' darling, but they sold a lot of records, and I kind of think their music holds up.
Oh, I do too. I absolutely agree. I saw them in Wichita.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, late 90s. Chuck was no longer that with the group, but yeah, really good. They had people dancing in the aisles, So
yeah, they had a lot of fans then. They still have a lot of fans, of course. This comes from the Harmony LP, which generated then 3 singles of note: Old Fashioned Love Song, Never Been to Spain, and The Family of Man. I mean, the Three Dog Night was an enormously popular group in the early 1970s.
They were right up there with the Partridge Family for me back in the day. And now the Partridge Family is no longer a rival for my affections.
Well, I was going to say,
but I still like the Three Dog Night.
I'm sure Three Dog Night would be thrilled to hear that they were paired alongside the Partridge Family for you. But right, it's a fine song, and they're just everywhere in the early 1970s. At number 5, then you've got Michael Jackson, solo Michael Jackson, with the single "Got to Be There." It's from the "Got to Be There" LP. Jackson is, I mean, it's an interesting dance right now. It's happening with the Jackson 5, and maybe you can talk about that a little bit, Dave. It's that the Jackson 5, circa 1970, maybe early 1971, are an enormous group. I mean, they're everywhere. You know, I think they're the first 3, if not 4 singles released make it to the top of the charts. I mean, they're incredible, but they hit. They hit a kind of slide. I think maybe that's a little overstated, but they reach their peak, and by the time we get to end of 1971, the Jackson 5 as a group are maybe not what they were a year or so ago, but Michael Jackson is becoming the dominant figure.
Well, if you think about it, you have a group that comes out of the starting blocks, and their first 3 singles are number 1. It's unheard of. So they set expectations so incredibly high. It's like they can do no wrong. Well,
That's right.
You're not going to continue to just keep pumping out number 1 hits.
No,
you can't, right? And so I think part of that was just in comparison to what they were doing earlier, which was just blockbuster. And then 1971, things cooled down.
It did. I think that's right. Things cooled down. You know, this song is interesting in that it has the brothers Jackson as background singers. So for, ostensibly it's a kind of Jackson 5 record. It is a record that was recorded and produced in Hollywood on the Tamla Motown label. Motown by this point had made that
West.
Motown West, Hitsville's West. Yeah, they had made that move to the West Coast, and it was very much kind of shepherded along in sort of the traditional Motown way. Berry Gordy oversaw the production. You had, it had the stamp, the Motown's stamp of approval. This is the
basically the Jackson's entire career. What started there was based there. They were never a Detroit group, right? They were basically LA from the beginning.
I think that's largely true, yeah.
So, because that's where Barry was at that point, Berry Gordy, and these were his up and coming stars.
They were his up and coming stars.
Needed a replacement for the Miracle, for the Temptations, who were losing Diana Ross as their big draw, right? It's a big attraction.
That's right.
And
Gordy, I think accurately saw them as sort of the new carriers of the flame, the Motown flame. And it's also true that by the time we get to like the fall and early winter of 1971, Michael Jackson is now kind of that. I mean, he's the hopes and dreams of Motown are really sort of, to some degree, really riding on Jackson's shoulders. And Jackson now will become a solo figure of note, right? As we move into 1972, I mean, it's Michael Jackson it's Michael Jackson with Rockin' Robin. It's Michael Jackson with Ben coming up. I mean, it's right. Michael Jackson becomes the figure really for Motown in this era.
Well, at least I think that's Berry Gordy's perception of where the future lies. But we can't forget that there were a couple surprises.
Well, there were.
As well, with like Marvin Gaye, with Stevie Wonder, who were becoming very big figures. Marvin Gaye, especially in 1971, Stevie Wonder through the mid 70s, late 70s, that's huge for Motown.
That's exactly right. No, you're exactly right. I would though counter with that. Marvin Gaye and Stevie Wonder, more specifically, developed on some degree apart from Gordy.
Yes.
Particularly with Wonder. I mean, he sort of takes hold of his career right now about the early 70s. And then, as you're suggesting, he becomes an enormous figure. I think it's fair to say.
I think it's Gordy's credit that he rolls with this because
I think that's right.
A lot of this, what's going on with Marvin Gaye and with Stevie Wonder, are not his normal. Don't correspond to his normal management philosophy.
I think that's fair
at all.
Yes, at all.
But he realizes, I think, what the magnitude of those stars is, and that he does not want to lose them. And so, like I say, he rolls with it. Not necessarily happy with it, but he does keep them for Motown, which is to his credit.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, well said. So we've got Michael Jackson with "Got to Be There" at number 5. At number 6, then we have Isaac Hayes' theme to Shaft. We talked about this a bit last month. Isaac Hayes, who is he's the kind of the cornerstone for Stax Records. He's a very interesting artist, writer, interpreter of others' materials. He's he oftentimes sort of, I think it's unfairly pigeonholed as sort of, he's the theme from Shaft guy. He's a very dynamic artist, a very complex artist, and fascinating. But the theme from Shaft is marvelous. It's a marvelous song. It works on so many levels. It's great. Yeah. It still holds up some 50 years later. But that's at number 6. At number 7, then, here we go. We have those soft rock icons. You have Bread's "Baby, I'ma Want You."
Yeah. And this was released in October, and it was the title track for their 4th studio album, which wasn't released. The album wasn't released until January 72. But this was another Bread song written by David Gates, produced by David Gates, sung by David Gates.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this before. The fact that Gates was a master balladeer, that he's one of the great love song writers, certainly of that time.
Absolutely, yeah.
Was a blessing and a curse for that group.
Yes, it was. Yeah.
Because some of their biggest hits were penned by him. Bread became the huge force that it was in the early 70s because of David Gates. But on the other hand, they had some real talent in that group. And some of these people wanted to break out and rock and roll a little bit. And I think it was a group that could have done that. They could have gone there. And maybe they wouldn't have been quite as successful, but I think they would have been more interesting as a group.
Yeah.
But Everything I Own came from the same album, Make It With You. It was a huge album for them again, but it reached the top of the East listening chart. Baby, I'm a Want You, the single, rose to number 14 on the UK singles chart in February. The B-side is an example of what we're talking about in terms of their ability to rock. It was Truckin', which is nice rocky pop thing, and it moves, and it's fun to listen to, and it kind of indicates what else was going on or what else could have been done. Especially, this was the first album, Make It With You, that had Larry Knechtel on keyboards.
A giant, a giant, yes.
Just He was a member of the Wrecking Crew going back to Phil Spector days. He played the piano, won a Grammy for it, for Bridge Over Troubled Water.
That's right.
That wonderful piano.
That's him. Yes.
It's Larry Knechtel, and he also played piano on Johnny Rivers' Rockin' Pneumonia and Boogie Woogie Flu, which is also just fantastic.
It's great.
So yes, he was everywhere, but Brad managed to win him for their group, and they could have gone nearly anywhere. He was multi-instrumentalist. He played piano, guitar, bass, harmonica, and so I think he was underutilized.
I think that's fair. No, I think that's fair. So Brad, who became Brad's Baby I'ma Want You, which is, I mean, it's
Yeah.
yeah.
It was part of what it was not my favorite Brad song, but I liked it.
Okay.
You
Well,
know, I was a big Brad fan.
yeah, I know. Yeah. But so there we have it. So at number 7, we have Brad's Baby I'ma Want You. At number 8, we have that dynamic duo, Sonny and Cher, with All I Ever Need Is You.
All I Ever Need Is You, from their fourth studio album, of the same title, and this was written by Jimmy Holiday and Eddie Reeves. Jimmy Holiday co-wrote "Put a Little Love in Your Heart" with Randy Myers and the wonderful Jackie DeShannon.
Yeah.
And Eddie Reeves co-wrote "Rings," recorded by very, very many people, covered, incredible, but never was a huge hit. Are you familiar with it? Rings by like Lobo or?
I confess I'm not really. No.
It's incredible because BMI awarded Reeves and Harvey their special citation of achievement for Rings because it had been performed over 1 million times on radio and television, and making it one of the most performed songs from BMI's repertoire of over 8 million songs. So that's huge, right?
Oh, it is. Yes.
All right. So this songwriting, that was their other big claim to fame. But we've talked about this a little bit before too. Sonny and Cher were enjoying a comeback.
Yeah.
That had been ushered in with Gypsies, Trams, and Thieves. And they had their own television show, their own variety show. And of course they sang this on their show as well. That's going to be on our playlist. Is the show version of this, which is live. Produced by Snuff Garrett. It was originally recorded by Ray Charles for his 1971 album, Volcanic Action of My Soul.
Is that right? Ray Charles. Awesome.
Ray Charles. And the B-side was I Got You, Babe, live. So this peaked at number 7, by the way.
Okay. Yeah, it's this is also the time when Sonny and Cher are entering the American consciousness as sort of a real-time soap opera, right? I mean, in addition to these songs that are becoming popular, then again, you mentioned the television show. That their shtick on the show was kind of the bickering back and forth, demeaning put downs, this kind of thing. And it also became, apparent that their relationship was beginning to splinter. And so there was this odd feeling when you would watch the show, and you can see it in some of the clips where it's, there's a kind of line that's being, it's no longer an act. It's an odd thing. That they very much become kind of America's couple. I'm not sure they become they were beloved in their own way, I suppose. But they are.
Yeah, well, they certainly were. Their show was incredibly popular, and they're back on the charts, right? So, interestingly enough, this song was the one that had the most legs on the charts. It spent 15 weeks on the Hot 100 chart.
That's a little surprising.
More than any other one. Yeah, that's
a little surprising. Yeah. Well, there you go. Yeah, so there you have it. So at number 8, then we have Sonny and Cher's "All I Ever Need Is You." At number 9, I don't know how to exactly encapsulate this. It's Don McClean's American Pie, and it's both parts 1 and 2 are charting at this point at number 9. American Pie then becomes, to some degree, kind of the song of the era. The RIAA put it at near the top of the songs of the century. It's there was a time when Don McClean was a folk singer and was relatively unknown, and then for almost whatever the last 2/3 of his life, it's been Don McClean of American Pie fame. And so to try to completely unpack it is, I mean, that's kind of a fool's errand. It's almost a kind of cottage industry, right? To sort of look at American Pie, which McClean himself described as a kind of parable, kind of a parable, open to multiple interpretations. But the song became famous because of these images, these allusions to, the day the music died, which McClean talks about in the context of the plane crash in Iowa, where the Big Bopper, Ritchie Valens and Buddy Holly died, which McClean, I guess, was 13 or so when this happened in the late 1950s. It made a huge impact on him. You've got the Jester, Dylan, you've got Jack Flash, Mick Jagger. I knew a girl who sang the blues, largely believed to be
Janis Joplin.
It's for almost 50 years, the worldwide public was sort of left to sort of guess on what was going on in the song. McClean sold his song notes just a few years ago, and since then he's been much more open about sort of what was going on with the song, including sort of the local references. He lived at the time in Cold Spring Harbor, New York, and this whole the levee. I drove my Chevy to the levee, but the levee was dry. The levee was a bar, and so it's a description of going to a bar that was closed, and then he went to nearby town called Rye, where there was a bar open there, and so the drinking whiskey in Rye. It refers to this bar that was open, these regulars there chugging away. There's just, again, we're not going to really do justice to it. If you want to explore the song in detail, there are, dozens of sites that are available to you that really will break it down honestly, word by word, phrase by phrase, stanza by stanza. It's really extraordinary the amount of attention this song has gotten. But I think
I really do think that a lot of it is fairly apparent for
I think that's right
of rock history, right?
I think that's right. Yeah, it's not really shrouded in that much mystery. I think you're absolutely right. But I do think it's fascinating that this song in a way describes an era that maybe is best kind of encapsulated with a kind of parable, right? The idea that for him to, the allusions here, I think, are very effective. And it obviously spoke to people. This was the longest song at the time, the longest song ever to chart as high as it did.
Yes,
and
it was incredibly long.
It was incredibly long for radio play. And it was also, in its own way, kind of complicated. And so it's an interesting kind of idea to think that a song like this would emerge as not just a very popular song, but almost a kind of era-defining song. Just a couple of things about this. At the end of the song, there's a kind of chorus, right, who sort of kick it in at the end. These background singers on the record, they are labeled the West 44th Street Rhythm and Noise Choir. And Ed Freeman, who was the producer of American Pie, later identified the people in the choir, included people like Pete Seeger, Carly Simon, Livingston Taylor, and James Taylor, sort of a kind of who's who of folk singers and artists of the day. It's very much the song that McClean is identified with. There hasn't been a show over the past 50 years where Don McClean hasn't sung American Pie. It comes from the American Pie LP, which also then yielded the single Vincent, which was a top 12, and also a beloved song in its own way.
And those are the two Don McClean songs that you need to have. And as far as I'm concerned, that pretty much That's pretty much it.
Well, that's pretty much it. And, and so this is the thing that McClean was, I think, faced with as an artist for really whatever the past decades, is that how do you kind of move on past American Pie? And I think it's, to be fair, I think it's been difficult. I mean, he still tours, he still records. But I think,
well, you can cover something by Roy Orbison, I guess.
And he did, right? And that's in fact what he ended up doing. But this was, I mean, I think it's overstated to say it was an albatross. But I think it's been a difficult thing. It's been difficult for him. But it's an amazing song. It's an important song. It's a song that I think most people know at least parts of and can hum along with. And so there's, it will be a song that people will remember fondly for, maybe for generations. And
all right,
so
I have a question for you. Maybe
yes,
I'm
go ahead.
alone in this. I had never heard of part 1 and part 2. For me, it's American Pie, period. So what is the part 1 and what is the part 2? Where is that?
Well, I don't have that in front of me. I know that the part 1 runs 4 minutes 11 seconds, and part 2 kicks in for another 4:31. I don't know where the split is.
So probably the first 3 stanzas are part 1.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. I remember the song being popular, and I don't remember it being split up. I mean, I remember it must have been the case, right, that a disc jockey back in the day when they actually played records would have 2 copies of it. They'd play the side 1 and then they'd have the side 2 ready or something. I don't know. Or maybe they played the album cut. I'm not quite sure which. But the 45 that was released, part 1, part 2.
Okay.
A so-called double A side, which again was the thing that was challenging about it, was the fact that the song was so dang long. But I think it's still like,
so if you bought it as a single, you could not listen to it in one piece. You had to flip it.
That's exactly right.
Halfway through.
That's
wow.
exactly right. That's exactly right.
Okay.
And so, I mean, the album
I did not know that.
Yeah. So the album itself was remarkably popular. And so a lot of people bought the LP with the thumb, and all that.
Right.
But yeah, at the 45, you had to flip it. And I guess people did, right? People would focus on one side or the next. So, yeah. So Don McClean's American Pie at number 9, very much a kind of defining song of the era. It will, of course, get to number 1. It'll spend 4 weeks at number 1, and it is, yeah, it's a iconic song. I mean, there's no getting around it.
Well, I remember first time I heard it, it was just I was blown away.
Absolutely. Well, so from the this is not the same kind of song. At number 10 is David Cassidy's note for note version of the Association's Cherish.
Which wasn't a great song in itself.
It's
we're on the same page with this, right?
It's pretty sappy. It's real sappy.
It's real sappy.
Okay, so all right, so we have talked for several months about Cassidy and the Partridge Family, which is really hitting on all cylinders by the time we get to December 1971. And Cassidy's great frustration with being sort of typecast as Keith Partridge. And so Cassidy, by this point, he's carved out a kind of solo career. He spends weekends touring or giving shows really around the world. And it very much is, I think, a strategic move on his part to try to sort of break the mold of Keith Partridge. Okay, so with that being said, the first big single from his solo album is Cherish, which is, I mean, easily could have been, you could imagine a Partridge Family.
Which is a miscalculation. Well, it was big, right? I mean, he had a hit with it.
Oh, for sure, absolutely.
It made the top 10, so it's kind of hard to second guess that. But if you're trying to get away from the Keith Partridge image, is this how you do it?
I think the answer is no. I think the answer is no. And it says something about the people who were running his career at this time, And also I think about Cassidy himself and his place in terms of, being able to assert himself. I mean, if, for example, right, the album, the single and the album were produced by Wes Farrell of Partridge Family fame. It was on the Bell label, which was the same album that was churning out the Partridge Family LPs and singles. And so there is this, people love the song, people loved David Cassidy, but as a kind of breakout or breakaway move, it seems a little misaimed somehow.
All right, look, I was 10 years old back in 1971, and I loved the Partridge Family. I loved the Monkees. I loved all these groups, and even I hated Cherish. So I think that says something. It's just,
Well, okay. So there we go. So we're going to cherry pick a little bit, but let's look at some cover magazine covers from mid-December 1971. And the first is, again, probably not a great surprise. The first is a TV Guide in mid-December, and it, of course, is the Partridge Family. This is the second time that the Partridge Family, the cast, has appeared on TV Guide in the past 3 months. This was, how would you categorize the Partridge Family at this point, Dave? I mean, in terms of a kind of the popularity of the show, the kind of legs that the show had, this was a real locomotive at this point, right? This was just more than just 30 minutes on Friday evening. There was something happening here that was big.
Well, for one thing, it was a family entertainment. The kids, certainly at our age, liked it. You had Susan Day as Laurie Partridge for the guys. You had David Cassidy for the girls and for the guys who wanted to be him. And you had their clean-cut, likable family, right? Just kind of milk and cookies sort of thing. So the parents could even watch this and maybe even feel a little bit hip because I like that too. I'm into rock and roll. Right. So it's that combination, and they were given good music to sing. It's a lot like the Monkees in that sense. They had some respectable pop chops. It wasn't some of these things. The sort of thing that can get embarrassing very quickly.
Sure.
If you're not singing good stuff. But they had decent hits, and I think what's not to like, right?
Yeah, I think that what's not to like. I think the point you make about them being sort of clean cut in a kind of modern way is an interesting one. This was an issue, and this was in the early 70s, hair length was still a kind of controversial, kind of political statement, and the men in the show, they had long hair. They wore sort of hip fashions. There was a kind of middle of the road kind of sensibility, though, as you're suggesting. Yes. And so it was
very non-threatening.
It was non-threatening. It was sort of youth culture or rock and roll or whatever, kind of presented in a very non-threatening kind of whatever milquetoast way.
And this is something that Hollywood did a lot.
That's right.
They took certain aspects of the counterculture that were appealing, and they sanitized them so that they didn't bring with them the associations of drug use, free love.
Yeah, that's right.
All that dirty stuff. Political protest. None of that. It's
none of that.
Long hair. It's very clean long hair. It's nicely cut. Nothing to worry about. Nothing to get upset about.
Yeah, you'd be happy to have these people as your neighbors. And sure. and sort of this is how it was presented. This was a very big show. Now, the show runs its course pretty quickly. But in this era, early 70s, 71 in particular, there are a few things bigger than the Partridge Family. Now, one other magazine we'll take a look at real quickly, and that is Time Magazine. This is, and easy enough to forget this, but in the early 1970s, the space program was still, well, it was still important in the United States. And we are just a couple of years removed from the moon landing. And Time magazine, mid-December 1971, has on its cover "Looking for Life Out There." In the expose, if you will, was the story about the search for extraterrestrial life and sort of what the next step would be for space exploration.
But this was still pre-SETI, right? They were maybe thinking about SETI at this point, but were not actually. They hadn't launched the capsule or anything.
I think that's right.
It was several years ahead of that.
But I think that's right. But it reflects, I think, a kind of cultural awareness of the importance of space. That there was a kind of common agreement that this was a kind of logical next step for the United States in particular. And I think you can connect that to Manifest Destiny and a lot of other things. But it also, though, I think reflects a bit of the floundering that the U.S. space program was entering into, right? They were coming to the end of the Apollo program. The moon had already been reached several times by this point. And what was that next step? And I think on some level, I mean, we're still kind of at a loss, at least in the United States, in terms of what that next thing is for space.
Well, I think the next thing for the United States, I think this is what NASA is putting up as their big thing is Mars, right?
I think at this point,
Mars.
I think
that really is what they're looking at this point as their primary goal.
50 years later, I mean,
yes.
It is remarkable because, again, and not to belabor this, but it is remarkable when Kennedy makes that declaration, we'll make it to the moon by the end of this decade, early 60s. It actually happens in 69, summer 69. That pace was just, it's actually kind of mind-blowing if you try to.
It is mind-blowing. It's incredible.
But once the moon had been reached, there was, I think, and maybe what the space program lacked was a real kind of torchbearer. I mean, in the way that Kennedy was a kind of inspirational figure in this regard, no other American politician really kind of picked it up. I mean, certainly this wasn't Nixon's bag, right? Nixon had lots of interests, but space wasn't really one of them. And so maybe that's what it lacked.
The other thing is, the whole thing with the moon is that had a huge symbolic meaning in terms of the space race.
That's right.
Who was going to dominate space? The Russians got off to a very scary first start with Sputnik, and it was important for the American psyche to be the first ones on the moon. And once we got there, and once we did that, it was kind of like, okay, we checked that off the list and we've won. So what do you do after you've won?
Yeah.
Well, you don't have to do anything.
Scoreboard. It's already there.
Exactly.
Yeah, look, it's up there. You can see it. There's the moon. United States, that kind of thing. Yeah, I think there's a lot to that. But I also think it's the case that in the early 1970s, there was a real hunger. I mean, it really had awakened something in American people in particular about exploration. And I think American people were, by and large, excited about the space program. I remember as a kid being really excited about the space program, even thinking as a young kid that's kind of what I wanted to do. I kind of wanted to be an astronaut. And I think a lot of kids in the United States, late 60s, early 70s, thought the same thing. And we just it just didn't really materialize in any kind of, well, it did, but it didn't. Let's continue to cherry pick though. A couple more songs if we could. Really interesting group, number 13. Really interesting group. It's Pop Staple and his clan. It's the Staple Singers with "Respect Yourself."
Yeah, Staple Singers were a group from Stax Records, and "Respect Yourself" was written by the Stax singer Luther Ingram and the house songwriter Mac Rice, and the whole thing was produced by Al Bell, who was a huge figure at Stax Records.
Oh yeah,
executive co-owner,
yes,
producer of all sorts of hits. In fact, he wrote one of the next hits for the Stable Singers, Take You There. I'll Take You There. So they threw everything at this song. It was released in 1971 from their album Be Altitude, Respect Yourself. The B-side was You're Gonna Make Me Cry. But Bell teamed the group with Muscle Shoals Swampers, with the engineer Terry Manning, also a huge name in music engineering. He was also at Abbey Road Studios for the last 20 years of the Compass Point Studios in Nassau for Island Records. And he did overdubs and recorded vocals and all that stuff. So he was in charge of that. And the horns were played by the Memphis Horns, which were kind of the Stax House horn group. And the horns were overdubbed after the vocals were recorded. But you had all this incredible talent coming together. And this was a time, and Al Bell conceived this as being the resurrection of Stax Records. Yeah. And they just threw all sorts of stuff on the market. Just boom, 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 boom. From Isaac Hayes, who we already talked about, Stable Singers, and on and on. They're looking at Motown. That's the competition, but it's kind of a high water mark. Well, maybe the second high water mark for Stax Records.
Maybe the second one, yeah. But I think we'd agree that Stax there was a certain kind of earthiness, a certain kind of grittiness, a certain kind of authenticity, maybe, I don't know if that's the right word, to the Stax Records. And when you compare them to much of what Motown was producing, there's something that's real about these records, particularly in the late 60s, early 70s. Really something to hang on to, these Stax singles in particular. Fascinating era. Well,
it's certainly a different approach to production, right?
Yeah,
and
for sure.
To development, and we see it on Motown.
Yeah, the Staple Singers are big. They're really big. They are charting pop charts. They're charting adult contemporary. They're owning basically the R&B charts. For the first few years of the 1970s, man, they're huge.
Well, and again, this particular song comes back to Respect Yourself, and it's talking to the Black community about empowerment and about how to move forward in very difficult circumstances.
That's right.
So it can be seen as part and parcel of the stuff that's going on just in general with Marvin Gaye and Sly and the Family Stone, and so on and so forth.
That's a fair point. Yeah. So we have at number 13, Respect Yourself from the Staple Singers. At number 14, it's Neil Diamond's Stones Crunchy Granola Sweet.
Yeah, this came from the Stones album, and what the Stones album is primarily known for is "I Am, I Said." Yeah, right? That was the big hit that drove this album's sales. But we have Stones, which was Neil Diamond said, "I'd call it a desperate love song. Stones to me has always been things that hurt people, things that cause pain. And that's what the song is about." So we have these lyrics. Stones would play inside her head. And where she slept, they made her bed. And she would ache for love and get but stones. Not really a happy song, but it goes on to talk about, but we'll get there. It'll be difficult, but together we'll manage to put together a love. It's interesting. He hasn't played this live since 1972.
Well, yeah,
Whatever else that might say. If we take a look at the I said, he plays that every chance he gets.
oh,
So
absolutely. I mean, yeah, people demand to hear it for sure.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's like his favorite song. I said, and it has the most meaning to him, and so on and so forth. Crunchy Granola Sweet, by the way.
yeah,
This was really about he's living in California and he's amazed at their their healthy food culture. And it's just really taken by that. And that's what inspires this song. And he said, I really thought that this might change the way people eat. That the song may change the way people eat. It hasn't, clearly, but he had hopes.
wow.
The song, the albums, it was produced by Tom Catalano. It's worth mentioning that the album Stones was mostly covers of other people's stuff, except for Stones, Crunchy Granola Sweet, and I Said. And he had stuff by Joni Mitchell. You had Leonard Cohen, Rod McCune, Roger Miller. So he was covering a lot of people and wrote just 3 songs of his own for that album.
It's interesting.
It was a big album. It was
big album. The Crunchy Granola Suite for me, Percy Faith, the Percy Faith Orchestra, they're kind of an easy listening group, did a smoking cover of it, which charted. And so when I hear, that's actually the Crunchy Granola Suite that I know is actually the Percy Faith version, which we'll include in the playlist. But there you have it. So you have Neil Diamond, right? Neil Diamond.
I have one.
Yeah, go ahead.
Trivia question for you here.
Okay.
Neil Diamond had clearly a first #1 album at some point, right?
Yep, must have.
When do you think that was?
Was it the jazz singer?
That's not a bad guess. But it's later.
It's later than the jazz singer?
It's later than the jazz singer.
I don't know.
That in itself is surprising. It was Home Before Dark, his 2008 album. That was his first #1 album on the US album chart.
Good grief. 2008?
Do you believe that?
That's hard to believe.
It's incredible. Because he had a number of really successful albums, but
well, that he did.
That was his first #1.
That's interesting. He was this early 70s period for Neil Diamond is fascinating in that there's a lot of like Jonathan Livingston Seagull. There's a lot of things here that are, interesting experiments. I mean,
I like Jonathan Livingston Seagull.
Yes. Well, I do too.
I was a fan.
I do too. I remember liking the book too. Richard Bach, I think, or something.
Yes.
Like that.
Oh, excellent. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so there we go. So 14, we have Neil Diamond's Stones and Crunchy Granola Suite. A couple more we can cherry pick. At number 15, we have the Stylistics from Philadelphia with You Are Everything. Everything is you, right? Stylistics, part of the Philadelphia sound. The Stylistics were a very interesting and I think compelling group. Sold a lot of records in this era. Tom Bell and Linda Creed wrote it. Tom Bell produced it. Tom Bell was the Philadelphia sound in this era. Philadelphia had its own kind of music scene in the early 1970s, very much dominated by people like Gamble and Huff and Tom Bell. It's interesting. Tom Bell, again, who produced this as a young man, sang alongside Kenny Gamble, Leon Huff, and this youngster named Daryl Hall as a quartet when they were teenagers. Curious.
We really need to do a Gamble and Hall thing for Behind the Curtain. They're so
That's
so
right.
incredibly important.
Now, the Philadelphia sound is really, it's really important, and it's really dominated the charts in this era. And the Stylistics were a very important group. But the Stylistics were almost strangers to their own albums or their own singles, as was the case with their first three albums. This particular song, only Arian Love and Russell Tompkins sang on it. There were other members of the Stylistics, but they weren't allowed to sing on it. I mean, it's very much a kind of studio creation. It strikes me a little bit like kind of like the Beach Boys circa early 1960s, where you have the Beach Boys on the cover and there they are, but who's actually recording? Well, it's the pros in the studio, this kind of thing. And the same was really true for the Stylistics. The Stylistics themselves had 10 top 40 hits on the pop charts, and 5 of those were in the top 10. They were a big group.
Wow.
Big group in the 1970s. Go ahead.
Who was the first songwriting partner of Graham Hall? Do you know?
I don't know.
Jerry Ross.
Huh? Jerry Ross?
Yes. That's that was they started off writing together, and that was back in
what
early,
is that right?
Early 60s. Yes. Absolutely.
Okay.
Right.
Wow. No idea. Okay. Well, awesome. There we go. Trivia fest. I had no idea. Okay. I have 2 more songs we'd like to talk about. At number 34 is The Who with Behind Blue Eyes. The Who, one of the most important rock bands of the late 20th century. It's also the case that The Who had really very little success as a singles group in the United States. They didn't do much on the singles chart. This particular song peaks at number 34, never gets any higher. This Behind Blue Eyes is one of the songs that came from the ill-fated Lifehouse project that Townsend worked on for years. Another kind of narrative, kind of rock narrative, kind of rock opera in the wake of Tommy. It's but the Lifehouse never really came together. But a number of the songs then that Townsend was working on made their way to the album Who's Next. And Who's Next then, I think by most standards, this is really if not the greatest, it's one of the greatest albums that the Who ever put out. It's one of the greatest albums ever.
Yeah. I agree.
It's an enormously powerful LP. It really, really, really holds up. And Behind Blue Eyes is it's a curious song. There's a kind of tortured lyric. In Lifehouse, the Behind Blue Eyes was actually going to be sung by the protagonist and villain named Jumbo. But the origin of the song actually comes from an event in Townsend's life in 1970. They're at a concert in Denver. He's being tempted by groupies. Townsend was married and really interestingly and surprisingly, tried to live a kind of straight and narrow life at that point. And so he sort of fought off the groupies and the urge, by reciting lines from his from Meher Baba, right, his spiritual leader. And so there is this kind of, that's apparently sort of the genesis for the song, is this attempt to sort of, grab hold of oneself and to try to control one's urges. It's produced by Glenn Johns, again, coming from the Lifehouse projects. This is really the peak Who. This is, I'm not sure if it gets much better for the Who than Behind Blue Eyes. It's remarkable. Just remarkable.
It was remade by Linkin Park, and
oh, good grief!
So, if you ask a kid like in our kids' age. The Who sang Behind Blue Eyes.
Oh my gosh.
They would say, "Oh, Lincoln Park," and then you say, "No, that was not a question; it was a statement." The Who
Oh my
sang Behind Blue Eyes. Yeah, it's unfortunate, but that's where we are.
So the last song we want to reference here is from another important group from the late 20th century. The group is Yes, and the song at number 48 is Your Move. I've Seen All Good People.
Yeah, this comes from the third studio album that was released February 19th, 1971. The Yes album.
Yes album, yeah.
And the Yes album was really their last shot at keeping a record contract because their first two albums had not done well. So the record company was seriously considering dumping them. And if this had not taken off the way it had, we would never have heard of Yes again. But they had basically been a cover band up until that point, and most of their albums have been in covers. But they came together and did this, and the Yes album is brilliant. It's just all around brilliant. But
terrific, yeah.
This song, Your Move, I've Seen All Good People. This single is 3 minutes, and it's just the Your Move part, right? This idea of the chess and the white queen, and you can move me along the black squares and all this stuff. Very chess thematic. But I've Seen All Good People. I was not part of this single. It was part of the album, and more album-oriented rock stations that were coming up in the 70s would play the entire thing. Your Move, I've Seen All Good People. So it became one of their signature songs.
It did. It absolutely did, and it really features John Anderson, their lead vocalist, who's really, his voice is very unique, and
very unique.
It again, Yes was a band of virtuosos. I mean, everybody who, whatever they played, they were extraordinary. But they really, like you're suggesting, it really all comes together on this third album. It's a career, kind of a career saver.
Yes, absolutely. This was written by John Anderson and the bass guitarist Chris Squire.
Yeah.
Produced by Yes and Eddie Halford. And it's worth mentioning that this was the Yes before Rick Wakefield joined.
Wakefield, yes. Donnie Kaye, yeah. So
Oregon.
Yeah, and so Rick Wakeman, then when Wakeman joins the Yes, it takes the group to another level. And among other things, Wakeman, of course, is famous for his cape and very theatrical kind of playing. But again, as we've mentioned before, this is an era where you have so much variety on the charts, and so you from month to month you have these incredible songs in juxtaposition, and you would hear them all on the same radio station. For example, they would all be in rotation. A song from Yes, a song from Melanie. It's just like kind of mind blowing in a way to think about the variety. Yeah. So there we have it. So there are the songs from mid-December 1971, and so as always, it's always fun and a pleasure to talk about them. And so Dave, take us home. What do our viewers need to know?
Well, you should look for our year-end wrap-up from 1971. We'll talk about the big hits of the year and talk about some of the significant events of 1971. Right. As always, you'll want to check out our playlists right here with all the songs we talked about today. You can watch some other 50 Years Ago This Month episodes right here. And if you enjoyed this and have not yet subscribed, you can do that right here.
Absolutely. There we go. And remember, Stephen Daves, we're on Twitter. Stephen Daves 1. Stephen Daves 1. We're on Twitter. So thanks, everybody, and we will see you soon.
Bye-bye.